2,700 years ago stood a city boasting aqueducts more advanced than those Rome would construct 6 centuries later. Nineveh, an urban marvel, was propelled by engineering feats that seemed to defy the very laws of physics known at the time. Spanning approximately 7 square kilometers, it was encircled by towering walls reaching a staggering 30 meters in height. These colossal barriers made visitors feel like mere ants in the presence of stone giants. Access to the city was meticulously controlled through 15 formidable gates, each serving as a complete military fortress, adorned with awe-inspiring sculptures of winged bulls, designed to both impress and intimidate. However, the true marvel of Nineveh lay beneath the feet of its inhabitants. An intricate network of 18 distinct canals channeled water from distant hills through aqueducts crafted from pristine white limestone blocks and sealed with impermeable cement. This was not merely a functional system. It was a stunning demonstration of applied civil engineering prowess. Substantial sections of a magnificent aqueduct erected by Sennacherib were unearthed in Jerwin, roughly 65 kilometers from the city. What made this system even more remarkable was its capacity to sustain an unprecedented concentration of people for that era. Within the city walls resided an estimated population ranging from 100,000 to 150,000 individuals, approximately 3 times the size of Babylon at the same time. Nineveh was a melting pot, a vibrant hub populated by people from every corner of the Assyrian Empire. This dynamic mix of diverse cultures, languages, and religious traditions created both opportunities and perpetual tensions. The city served as an experimental ground for advanced urban living, where techniques of municipal administration were developed and tested on a grand scale. It featured artificially irrigated gardens nourished by carefully planned canals, monumental temples dedicated to a multitude of deities, and opulent palaces that rivaled any known construction of the period. Nineveh represented the zenith of Mesopotamian urban civilization. The public gardens were meticulously irrigated not only for their aesthetic appeal, but also as a practical display of technological mastery over nature. Sennacherib established public parks, ornamental gardens, long-distance aqueducts, and intricate irrigation ditches, systematically expanding the city's existing infrastructure. Some modern historians even theorize that the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon were, in fact, located here in Nineveh. Built under Sennacherib's direct oversight, the city sprawled out from atop the walls as an organized labyrinth, where streets wide enough to accommodate royal chariots bisected densely built blocks. However, to secure housing and survive in this technologically advanced metropolis, one first needed to grasp how local families organized themselves internally to confront the daily challenges of concentrated urban life, as 3 entire generations often lived in the same room. The reason behind this living arrangement had little to do with sentimental traditions or romantic cultural inclinations. It was a matter of sheer economic survival in a metropolis where every square centimeter of space commanded a premium. Archaeological excavations conducted in the residential ruins have revealed a consistent pattern of houses meticulously organized around open central courtyards, where grandparents, parents, children, uncles, cousins, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law literally shared every available inch of covered space. When a man married in Nineveh, tradition dictated that he bring his new wife to live and work on his family's property. However, in a densely populated city, these family properties were, in reality, cramped urban spaces where the concept of individual privacy simply did not exist. Each residence unearthed by archaeologists served simultaneously as a home and as a small, specialized production facility. Daly's objects systematically uncovered by archaeologists during excavations provide clear evidence of domestic productive activities, complete looms for fabric manufacturing, ovens specifically designed for baking bread, large jars for water storage, and meticulously constructed underground deposits to preserve grains, olive oil, and other essential foods during periods of scarcity. The head of the family, typically the oldest living man, wielded absolute control over all resources available to the group. He made all the critical decisions: distribution of food, assignment of work tasks, approval of marriages, and management of family finances. Upon the patriarch's death, the eldest son automatically inherited this position of total authority over all other members of the extended family. These extended families did not represent a cultural preference rooted in traditional values, but rather a stark economic necessity in a metropolis where basic resources were scarce and cooperation between multiple generations often determined the difference between survival and utter failure. Women had specific, yet absolutely vital, responsibilities. They completely managed domestic food production, simultaneously cared for children and the elderly, and often managed small family businesses that supplemented the primary income. Children began contributing economically to the family at a very young age. By the age of 5, they were already assisting with simple but necessary tasks. By the age of 10, they had already mastered basic trades that would eventually enable them to earn money. Education took place entirely within the home, with practical knowledge being passed directly from generation to generation through demonstration and supervised practice. Sleeping arrangements were a complicated logistical matter that required careful planning. Several people shared the same small room, sleeping on simple mats placed directly on the compacted earth floor. During the winter months, everyone physically huddled together to conserve body heat. In the summer, entire families retreated to the terraces of the houses, where the night wind offered some respite from the suffocating heat of the day. The markets of Nineveh functioned much like a modern stock exchange, albeit without any governmental regulation or legal protection for inexperienced investors. Prices of essential goods fluctuated dramatically as commercial caravans arrived on schedule or were delayed for weeks due to unforeseen problems on long-distance routes. Experienced and well-informed merchants could become wealthy virtually overnight by capitalizing on these fluctuations. Inexperienced or ill-prepared traders, on the other hand, could lose their entire savings in a single miscalculated transaction. The Assyrians had intelligently adopted and adapted the sophisticated Babylonian banking system for their own urban commercial transactions. The system operated in a surprisingly modern fashion. You deposited your silver or other precious metals with an established banker and received in exchange an official receipt engraved on baked clay. This clay receipt effectively functioned as liquid money. You could travel to another distant city, present the receipt to a local banker, and receive the equivalent value in silver in return. It was quite literally the first fully documented international banking system in human history. Merchants specializing in long-distance trade controlled the intricate commercial routes that physically connected Nineveh with distant Arabia, wealthy Egypt, and mountainous Anatolia. Refined gold and expensive perfumes from southern Arabia, fine linen and colored glass manufactured in Egypt, gold and delicate glassware produced in Phoenicia, aromatic cedar wood cut in Lebanon, treated skins, and wrought iron from Asia Minor arrived at the markets through these exceptionally well-organized international commercial networks. Local artisans residing in Nineveh formed corporations strictly organized by specific types of professional specialization. Blacksmiths who worked metals, potters who molded ceramics, weavers who produced fabrics, carpenters who built furniture, and jewelers who crafted ornaments occupied completely separate and clearly defined streets within the complex system of urban markets, rigidly controlling who was permitted to practice each specific profession. The artisanal workshops excavated by archaeologists reveal clear evidence that, to become a qualified and recognized artisan, one first served for several years as an unpaid apprentice. Then, one paid substantial fees to gain official entry into the appropriate corporation. Only after completing this lengthy and expensive process could one finally open one's own independent business. Anyone who attempted to work outside this established system faced severe physical punishment, administered by the organized artisans themselves. Cuneiform records of commercial contracts reveal the existence of at least 50 different types of specialized professions operating simultaneously in Nineveh, ranging from manufacturers of military chariots to creators of luxurious perfumes. Each profession maintained its own specific market, its own internal operating rules, and its own carefully guarded trade secrets. However, neither the amount of accumulated wealth nor the level of artisanal skill could guarantee true social status within the rigid urban hierarchy. Only 1% of the total population of Nineveh knew how to read and write. To become a qualified scribe, one first needed to completely master the 600 distinct characters of the cuneiform system and then intensively study multiple areas of human knowledge, including practical agriculture, advanced mathematics, administrative politics, official religion, applied botany, commercial business, and construction techniques. Education took place in the Aduba, literally translated as House of Tablets, where students dedicated their entire lives from dawn to dusk to learning. The student body of the scribal schools was composed exclusively of male children of the established nobility, high-level clergy, and members of the prosperous merchant class. After completing years of intensive and rigorously supervised educational training, graduates finally received the official title of Dub.Sar, which literally means tablet writer, in Sumerian or Tupsaru in the Akkadian language spoken by the Assyrians. A detailed list of specific names of scribes found during archaeological excavations in the ruins of Nineveh precisely documents how these literate professionals were directly responsible for meticulously copying and carefully editing the thousands of literary, scientific, and administrative works personally gathered by the Neo-Assyrian king Ashurbanipal for his royal library. These specialized scribes worked professionally as siru, officials who interpreted legal documents, copied official texts, and created new written materials for the imperial state, religious temples, or private citizens wealthy enough to pay for their service. With the passage of time and accumulation of experience, the most talented scribes eventually became completely original authors, independent creators of hymns dedicated to various deities, epic poems about legendary heroes like Gilgamesh, and detailed historical records that preserved important events for future generations. The administrative position of scribe of the royal palace was considered so politically important that it was second only to the king himself in terms of influence over governmental decisions. Professional soldiers formed another privileged social class through the highly efficient military organization developed by the Assyrians. The Assyrian army was internationally renowned for its rigorous discipline, innovative tactics, and advanced equipment, which allowed them to conquer and control vast territories. But the common male population faced a completely different reality: obligatory collective servitude, which required unpaid work in the construction of grandiose palaces, massive defensive walls, and complex irrigation canals. This collective servitude was essentially forced labor, disguised as civic patriotic duty. Healthy adult men were regularly summoned to abandon their normal economic activities and work for free on imperial construction projects. Refusal or attempted evasion resulted in severe punishments that could include imprisonment, heavy fines, or even public execution. Even educated scribes and trained soldiers, despite their relative social privileges, still had to completely submit to an even greater power that absolutely controlled every aspect of daily life in Nineveh. This superior power did not stem from military authority or academic knowledge, but from a source that permeated every personal decision, every economic activity, and every moment of urban existence. If you could study from dawn to dusk to master 600 cuneiform characters and become one of the most powerful 1%, comment, "I could do it." Let's see who has that determination in the comments. Imagine not being able to eat a single meal, begin any work, or close your eyes to sleep without first seeking specific permission from invisible divine forces. Assyrian religion functioned as a system of social control, based on multiple gods who symbolized different aspects of the sun, moon, and visible planets in the night sky. The detailed astronomical knowledge developed by the priests allowed them to mathematically calculate the precise moments to perform obligatory rituals based on the predictable movement of celestial bodies. Of Semitic language and polytheistic tradition, the Assyrians firmly believed that these gods directly controlled every aspect of human life, from the success of harvests to the outcome of military battles. At the core of their religious theology, the sun god was artistically represented as a despotic sovereign, living a life of absolute luxury because of the direct connection between religion and astronomy. The Assyrians developed impressive scientific knowledge about planetary movements, lunar cycles, and various celestial phenomena. Monumental temples erected in Nineveh functioned simultaneously as centers of economic power and direct political influence. Sennacherib personally oversaw the construction of elaborate temples dedicated specifically to Sin, Nergal, Shamash, Ishtar, and Nabu. Each of these deities maintained its own specialized priests, meticulously detailed specific rituals, and particular demands that the entire population had a legal obligation to comply with without question. The priests controlled much more than just religious ceremonies performed inside the temples. They directly administered the temples that operated simultaneously as commercial banks, food distribution warehouses, and administrative centers for financial loans. If any person failed to comply with their prescribed religious obligations, they could be immediately cut off from the municipal food supply system, effectively condemned to starvation in a city where local agricultural production was insufficient. Daily religious rituals were legally mandatory for the entire urban population, regardless of social class or professional occupation. Upon waking each morning, you had the obligation to make specific offerings prescribed by the religious calendars. Before consuming any food, it was necessary to perform detailed ritual purifications. Before commencing any productive work, you had to seek formal permission from the appropriate gods for your occupation. Before sleeping each night, other elaborate rituals of spiritual protection were absolutely necessary. Systematic archaeological excavations have revealed physical evidence that every residential house, regardless of the family's economic status, maintained its own permanent domestic altars, where the family performed obligatory daily religious ceremonies. Ceremonial objects of worship discovered by archaeologists demonstrate that these religious practices were universally observed, irrespective of social class, ethnic origin, or specific profession. During certain specific times of the year, determined by complex astronomical calculations, the entire city literally ceased its normal activities to participate in religious festivals that lasted for consecutive days. During these sacred periods, normal economic work was completely suspended by religious decree, and all inhabitants were obligatorily involved in public processions, collective sacrifices, and communal banquets organized and financed by the temples. Until one day, a solitary foreigner brought a radically different message that would completely shake this established millennia-old religious system. If you believe that God has control over all areas of your life, just as he had over Nineveh, comment, "God has control." Show your faith in the comments. Jonah arrived in Nineveh like any other traveler routinely passing through the city's 15 monumental gates. But what he carried were not goods to sell in the bustling markets or services to offer to the local population. It was a prophetic message that would fundamentally alter the functioning of the greatest metropolis in the ancient world. Jonah 3 verse 4 textually records that he systematically traversed the city, loudly proclaiming, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." The Bible specifically describes Nineveh as an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey, likely referring to the complete circuit necessary to traverse the entire urban area. This description corresponds precisely to what modern archaeologists have discovered through systematic excavations: a metropolitan area of approximately 7 square kilometers with an estimated population of between 100,000 and 150,000 permanent inhabitants. For a message to spread effectively throughout this massive urban expanse, it was necessary to utilize the established communication systems already functioning in the city. Jonah 3 verse 5 reports that the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest to the least of them. The biblical text clearly indicates that the popular response was both immediate and universally comprehensive. In a strictly hierarchical society like Assyria, where educated scribes, trained soldiers, specialized artisans, and working slaves occupied completely fixed social positions and rarely interacted as equals, something extraordinary was happening for all the different social classes to react uniformly in the same way. The news eventually reached the king of Nineveh himself. He arose from his official throne, laid aside his ceremonial royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. In the traditional Assyrian political system, the king governed as the direct and personal representative of the gods on earth. His political authority derived entirely from his established religious legitimacy. For an Assyrian monarch to publicly abandon royal robes and sit in ashes was a completely revolutionary political act with enormous social implications. The king subsequently made an official proclamation that was broadcast throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, as recorded in Jonah 3 verse 7, specifically commanding, "Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock, taste anything. Let them not feed or drink water." This royal order clearly demonstrates how Nineveh's administrative system operated. The king possessed sufficient political power to control not only individual human behavior, but also the complete management of all domestic animals in a city. Jonah 3 verse 8 continues, detailing that man and beast should be covered with sackcloth, call out mightily to God, and turn away, each from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. The practical extent of this collective fast would have been dramatically visible throughout the city. The markets that normally bustled with commercial activity became completely empty. The artisans' workshops totally ceased functioning. The complex system of food and water distribution was voluntarily suspended for a city that depended entirely on complex urban logistics to adequately feed more than 100,000 people daily. Completely stopping all activities related to food production, distribution, and consumption represented a practically impossible administrative challenge. The 18 canals automatically continued bringing fresh water from the distant mountains, but no one consumed it. The underground deposits in family homes, normally accessed daily, remained closed and untouched. Jonah 3 verse 10 records the final result. When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil way, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. The collective behavioral transformation was recognized not only by local inhabitants and external observers, but by God himself, who had sent the original message through Jonah. 40 days later, Nineveh continued functioning normally, but something had permanently changed in the collective consciousness of the greatest city in the ancient world. And if you want to know more surprising stories from the Bible that will open your eyes, click here on the screen to watch Life 3,000 Years Ago in Israel and discover more. You will discover secrets that changed history forever. Yeah,